Derby County got their fourth win in a row by beating Preston 2-0. The reason why it was a big win, of course, was because Ryan Liambe has now broken the championship record for the most appearances without ever scoring a goal. And we've been talking about it for ages, Justin. But he's finally done it by playing just 2 minutes and then going off injured.
Does that count as an appearance?
Of course it does. He appeared, didn't he?
Yeah, I suppose. Okay. Yeah, it is massive. We've been harping on about this for a very long time. I imagine many will not be interested, but this is actually quite a feat for a professional footballer to go this long without ever scoring. You know, Lloyd Doyley had a T-shirt made when he eventually scored. Just imagine what Ryan Niembe could have made when he eventually scores. Potentially another T-shirt. I'm just lost for words.
There'll be more than T-shirts. There's going to be statues and everything. I was there when I saw Ryan Liambe score a goal. 202 championship appearances he's made without ever scoring a goal, which, as I say, is the most in championship history. I think Lloyd Doyley, he definitely wasn't on 200 when he scored his goal. I think he was near 200, but not at 200. So that's how long Liambe has gone. And for those who aren't aware, he's played 290 games in his entire career and never scored, which is just, you'd have thought one would hit him in the face at some point and go in, Justin, but he's not even come close.
I don't think he ever gets close to the goal. It's worth bearing in mind.
He's not had a shot this season.
There you go. He doesn't get anywhere near. It's worth bearing in mind he did go off injured. So, of course, get well soon, right now, babe.
After nearly giving away a goal, we should point out, he tried to pass it back to the keeper, made an absolute hash of it, and then was trudging back injured. While trying to close down his match. He had an absolute nightmare.
But yeah, it's an incredible feat. I don't know if it's an unwanted record or a record that he wants, but if I get to this certain point in my career, I'm either going to be desperate to score or I'm just not asked. It'd be a great talking point for him to never score a goal in his entire career.
I think the record in English football for someone never scoring is 500 appearances, so I don't think he's going to get close to that anytime soon. But the fact he's not even had a shot this season makes me think that record could be safe for some time. But an historic moment, and we should not let that lie. Anyway, I think I've stalled enough from talking about this game because it definitely wasn't a classic, was it? It was a pretty tough watch at times. As far as 2-0 wins go, it wasn't the most entertaining, put it that way. But nonetheless, it is a huge, huge win for Derby County, isn't it? They're fourth in a row, and it sees them jump up 2 places out of the relegation zone and up to 20th. Incredible when you remember where they were when John Eustace came in, Justin.
Yeah, it's an astonishing run of form. It really is. I think I was going into this game a little bit more sceptical than others because I think many assumed their good run would just continue. And 3 wins on the bounce is going into the game was obviously a really good run of form, but they preceded that with 3 losses on the bounce. So form can change very, very quickly, especially when your momentum gets disrupted by the international break. It just happens. But to be fair to Derby, they did in this game what they've done in their previous 3 games, where they were very competitive, they were resolute, they were hard to break down, and they took the moments when they came. And I think despite it not being a classic and there not being a lot of chances, I think Derby enjoyed a lot more of the territory domination, if you like. They certainly had a lot more drive in the final third than Preston ever did. So I think that's a huge positive and that's a real marker of change for Derby, because otherwise they'd have just sat back and been really bland, just a case of you come at us, we'll see what we can do. Whereas actually Derby are taking to game to opposition now. And that's a huge, huge turnaround. So yeah, it was a huge win for Derby. Really is. You can't understate it. The form they're on is actually incredible because they've not won 4 games in a row for 4 years, which is an astonishing feat in itself. So yeah, credit to John Eustace there.
Oh yeah, 100%. Derby had won just 3 from 24 before John Eustace came in. 3 in 24. That's over half their season, Justin. So 4 wins on the trot out of nowhere is absolutely mad. And while Eustace hasn't turned them into Real Madrid or anything, he's got them so well organised and managing games brilliantly. That's the big thing for me here, Justin. Game management is such a valuable skill that a lot of good managers at this level can sometimes struggle with, but Eustace, for me, is one of the best at it in the whole of the Championship. And they are getting the job done. They've got all the momentum behind them right now, and are now in a position where you'd say it's more likely than not that they stay up, because you'd have thought there'd be 3 poorer teams at this stage than Derby County.
Well, I think winning 4 games in a row really does swing your perception, because it's a run of form that no other team down there is on. However, I think it's just really important to say that it's really tight. It's really, really tight down at the bottom of the table. Derby are on 41. They've risen 2 places. But they're level on points with Hull. They're a point off Oxford and Stoke, and only 1 point ahead of Cardiff, and obviously 3 ahead of Luton. This is not done by any means, and they've got some big games. They've got to play Luton, they've got to play Stoke, obviously got to play Hull as well. So
Cardiff as well.
Yeah, and
a lot of teams around them.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that with all of that in mind, it can change very, very quickly. So I think it's just really, really important to be tempered, because they're still not playing teams off the park. They don't have to. You don't have to at this stage of the season. But like I said, things can swing very, very quickly in championships. You look at Oxford's form; they were unbeatable under Gary Rowett when he first came in, and now they're sort of back into the fight essentially. So as I say, you cannot count your chickens at all.
Surprised about your scepticism, Justin, when Derby have signed Eric Peters on a deal until the end of the season. Are you forgetting that?
I did. They've also got Martin Waghorn training with them, which was incredible to see the fact that I think it was Rob Dawson at Sky stated that Martin Waghorn's come out of retirement, quote unquote retirement, to train with the team, although he won't be registered as a player. So he's just having a kickabout basically. And I think it might be the same for Eric Peters.
Eric Peters, Jeff Hendrick, Martin Waghorn. God, Derby are going to be a good team in 2017, aren't they? I'll tell you that much. But actually, just quickly before we move on from this game, I don't think I'll offend anyone by saying this, particularly Preston fans, but Preston are so bang average, aren't they? I was at this game, Justin. I was just sat there watching it, thinking, you could tell their season is over already. I'm not sure. I was just thinking to myself, looking at this team, I'm not sure they're ever going to break out of the Preston zone, are they? Because that team is just full of 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 players. So it stinks of mid-table energy, Justin.
Yeah, it's really hard to break out of that mould. It's really hard to break out of putting Preston in that mould, because Preston just do what they do best. And I think the big difference this season is at no point they've flirted with a playoff push. I think Paul Heckingbottom's done a really good job to just stabilise things at Preston after what was a really tumultuous sort of first couple of months there. But at the end of the day, I think it's his job to turn around Preston and turn them into a team that can compete higher up in the table, which isn't that far for them because they are a comfortably mid-table team. I think it's going to be very difficult. And I think this game, what they summarised was there needs to be a complete change of attitude and mentality, I think, in the squad. Because you look at the first half, it was a really dull first half, but the second half, they stopped winning sort of duels in midfield. They left players free at set pieces, and I think the second goal from Derby's perspective came from a throw in as well, which you shouldn't really be conceding when you've got 3 centre halves on the pitch. So yeah, they are a very, very average team. Maybe average is where they want to be, but a lot of fans like to dream, and I don't think Preston have ever given the fans the opportunity to do so.
Who is there who can make this team, who can make the fans dream? There isn't anyone there who gets me off my seat at all. I was actually going through that team, and keep in mind, I'm a Derby fan, been fighting relegation all season. I was just looking at the players. I was like, I'm not sure how many of these I would actually take at Derby. It just said something about a mid-table side. It's just so bang average. Preston will be without goalkeeper Freddie Woodman for the remainder of the season with an ankle injury, which he sustained in the gym over the international break. He had played all but one game this season prior to the last international break. Out for the season after going to the gym, Justin. So that's a new one, I think. Have you ever done that at CrossFit?
I've never injured my ankle. I don't know how you injure an ankle at a gym. There are some times where you can be on a bike. If you don't get off it properly, the pedal can trap your leg. Like you can trap your foot between the floor and the pedal, which can be really painful, but that can happen anywhere. But yeah, I've never done
those stepper machines.
Oh, they're just exhausting. Like you could generally just fall down the stairs on one of those.
Yeah.
Which could be dangerous.
I don't know why a footballer would go on them, because as far as I'm aware, it's just like to work your butt, isn't it?
Well, everyone, Ryan, get some knowledge around the gym, because if you work on your glutes, you get more powerful in your spring, all right? So you jump higher, you get a bit quicker, all right? Come on, do better. We need to. You need to be healthier. You need to be fitter.
I don't want to be healthier. I just want to eat my takeaway pizzas Freddie
Woodman was trying. Freddie Woodman was trying, all right? And if he's trying hard enough that he gets injured, then he's working hard enough. Unless he just rolled his ankle going to the water fountain or something.
Maybe he did. Maybe that's what's happened. Sliders can be very dangerous just on occasion.
Footballers wear them all the time as well in gyms, which is ridiculous. And if you have an induction at any gym, they tell you you're not allowed to wear sliders. So actually, if he is wearing sliders and he's rolled his ankle, because you get no support in sliders, it's his own fault.
There you go. That'll teach him. Well, Derby's win has had a significant impact on the relegation battle. Not only does it mean Derby leap out of the bottom three, it means Cardiff drop into the relegation zone for the first time since the start of Jan. And there's now just 2 points separating Stoke in 18th and Cardiff in 22nd. Just 7 points separating QPR in 15th and Luton in 23rd. It's so bloody tight down there, isn't it? But very, very finely poised, Justin Peach, for that final 7 games.
It is, and I think what happens over the next couple of weeks is the games can really shape the seasons for the teams above the teams that you mentioned. Swansea and QPR both on 45 points. We were speaking about QPR's performance on Saturday against Stoke. If they repeat that performance over the next couple of games, they can find themselves back into relegation trouble. Swansea have got a big game against Derby at the weekend, so this is what happens: is you can find yourself being complacent in your own mindset, and you can be dragged back in it. So we mentioned those teams there going up to Stoke, QPR, Swansea, and Portsmouth. They're not home and host yet. They're in a bit of bother, and obviously if Preston repeat the type of performance that they did against Derby and they're on 47 points. They can get dragged back in it as well. I think it's going to take 50 points to stay up. So you really got to start chipping away at results, because the tightness, it's like getting on the London Tube at 5:30 p.m. You can't move. You cannot move. It's too tight. Everyone's bumping into each other. No one's apologising. Sure, you're just trying to get off the train as soon as possible. Can't. You're in it.
The only thing I would say is Portsmouth, QPR, Swansea. I would think there's too much traffic between them and the relegation zone for them actually to go down. I wouldn't say they're completely home and hosed, but it would take a dramatic turn of events and for one of those 3 teams to be absolutely shocking between now and the end of the season. But Justin, I would say this is one of the tightest relegation battles I can ever remember in the Championship. 5 teams separated by 2 points with 7 games to go. It's basically a 7-game mini-league now for all those sides, isn't it? But then you've got the added complication of Luton picking up in form. It's so hard to call, because you can make a very strong claim as to why any of that bottom 7 will go down. The only thing I can say with a degree of certainty right now is that it's looking more and more the case that Plymouth are gone. But otherwise, it's a bit of a lottery predicting that bottom 3, isn't it? I mean, right now, if you're pushing me to make a call, I'll be sticking with my prediction from a couple of weeks ago of Plymouth, Luton and Oxford. But if someone were to come to me and say Plymouth plus 2 completely different sides, I'd just find it hard to argue it, Justin, put it that way.
You can make a case for all of them, can't you? You can make a case for all of them to go down. You can make a case for all of them to stay up as well. It is quite incredible. It's such a big swing, isn't it? It's such a big swing. And you are right. The turning form of Derby and Luton has really, really shook things up. And the likes of Cardiff, Hull, Stoke and Oxford, they've been able to unable to really get a run of form going, and I think that's they're probably shitting themselves, to be absolutely blunt, because as I say, the form of Derby and Luton turning around at the drop of a hat it's probably surprised quite a few. It's probably surprised us a little bit as well. So yeah, this is a huge couple of weeks. The as you say, the 7-game mini league that we've got going on. I still think it can drag the likes of Preston, QPR and Swansea, Portsmouth into it again. If they don't pick up results and form. you're all right. There's too much traffic between them, but we've seen it in seasons that a team just absolutely drops like a stone. Hull, all those years ago. I can't remember who was in charge. Was it Grant McCann was manager? Wasn't he?
It was Grant McCann, yeah.
Yeah, that's how quickly a team can drop, especially if the form of teams below them does pick up. So can't rule them out. This is why it's so tight. This is why it's so busy. It's uncomfortable for everyone down there.
Yeah, you've got the likes of Cardiff, Stoke, Hull, who have not been able to shift themselves all season, have they? And now that the tide of the bottom three is just getting higher and higher, could very easily sweep them in. And that's why it's so fascinating heading into these final 7 games. Justin, before we have a quick break, I wanted to bring everyone's attention to my latest video on the Second Tier YouTube channel. It's called Why Do Leeds United Fall Apart? It's where I explore the previous occasions where Leeds have done just that and try to answer why it happens. But the question I wanted to pose to you, Justin Peach, is why do you think it happens? I mean, we could do a whole podcast in itself on why it happens and talk for a long time, but just briefly, why do you think it happens?
I think it's a psychological block, to be honest. I think if you manifest something for so long, it eventually becomes true, doesn't it? You repetitively
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, you eventually repetitively thinking of something into fruition. Like I think myself into a world-class podcaster, and guess what? It happened, ladies and gents. That being said, sometimes it is just luck. It is just luck. Leeds lost around 9 players last season during the international break, which impacted things. That being said, do Leeds actually ever fall apart? I think that's another question. I mean, how often have Leeds fallen apart for this to become a cliche over the past sort of 10 years? I think it's a continuation of the cliche, the earlier cliche of quote unquote doing a Leeds, which obviously was back in the 2000s when they overspent in Champions League, and it all went tits up really quick. That was doing a Leeds, and I think that's just now evolved into modern culture to this because it's funny for the neutral.
If you want an answer to that question of why does it happen, how often do Leeds fall apart, you can watch my video and I'll tell you it happens a hell of a lot over the past 15 years. It's not just this season and last season where we've seen it happen, or potentially this season is what I should say. But do you want to know why I think it happens? You can go find that video and watch for yourself. By the way, we've now hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube now, Justin. Go us. But a big thank you if you have subscribed. If you haven't already, please do just that. We've got some big plans for our YouTube channel coming up, which you don't want to miss out on. Right, Justin, after this quick break, we'll have a talk about Sheffield Wednesday failing to pay their players on time and Sunderland selling a wonder kit. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. Let's have a talk about some of the news from across the Championship over the past few days then. And Sheffield Wednesday have certainly took the headlines by storm because they failed to pay their players' wages for March. The club said it was a temporary issue due to debts owed to club chairman Dapon Chansiri. They said he's working hard to resolve this issue as early as possible. And in the meantime, he's thanked everyone for their patience and understanding. But Justin Peach, it says a lot about how farcically run Sheffield Wednesday are that this isn't even a surprise anymore, is it?
No. It's also, there's a trust factor as well in there. It just isn't the case. I think for a football club to have done this as many times as they have done, I mean, Wigan did it several times in one season under previous ownership in the Championship, but Chansiri seems to have spread it across a number of years. It's just disappointing, and that's understating it because you've got to. We all have to remember that a lot of Championship footballers, they're not multimillionaires. They do rely on their salaries to pay their bills, to pay their mortgages, and if your employer's not doing that, you're not going to have faith in your employer. It's as simple as that. I did see a journalist who covers Sheffield Wednesday, Alex Miller, providing the update. There are a lot of people that are dissatisfied with the situation, and there's no forewarning to the situation either, which I just think is incredibly poor because I think as an owner of any business, you need to keep all your stakeholders informed. And again, as an owner, people rely on that money to pay their way. And Chansiri is taking that away from them. And again, a lot of it comes down to trust. How often have we had this headline from Sheffield Wednesday over the years? Too many. Too many. One too many. One is too many, I should say.
Yeah. Well, you say the players aren't too happy about it. I wouldn't be too happy either if my wages were late, Justin, It's just a fact of life. And I think you're absolutely right to point out that not all players at Wednesday will be very, very well paid. You'll have some there who aren't massively well paid and will be relying on these wages. So it's a massive, massive shame. But it's always funny to me how owners like Chansiri, when they don't pay the wages on time, they always say it's a temporary issue. You never get sensibly run clubs having these temporary issues,
no.
do you? But it seems to be a regular thing with Sheffield Wednesday, who, we mustn't forget, owed money to HMRC last November. So it's just an utter shambles. It's like Chansiri thinks to himself, I haven't messed with the fans in a while, the ones who spend hundreds of pounds a season supporting my club. Let's do something just to piss them off even further. I just don't get it. But it once again raises questions about how financially sustainable Sheffield Wednesday are as a club. And it's a reminder that Sheffield Wednesday aren't going anywhere while Chansiri runs this club. I mean, there are a few Championship clubs who have a ceiling right now because of their owners, and I'd say Wednesday are right at the top of that list, particularly because I think it's increasingly likely that Danny Rule will leave. The thing I don't really understand is, what is Chansiri getting out of owning Sheffield Wednesday? Because he's apparently struggling to afford it. So how's he benefiting, Justin?
Yeah, I think we can. Chansiri, it's very obvious. It's very easy to criticise him because if you do the same thing over and over again in your 10 plus years, 10 years as an owner, you're incompetent, aren't you? And if nothing changes or evolves, it's an astonishing level of incompetence. And you are right. What is Chansiri getting out of this? Because to be really blunt, your own supporters don't like you. Your staff aren't keen on you if you're not paying them. The club is not going anywhere. I think, I'll be blunt here, they're more likely to be relegated again than they are to ever skirmish with the top six, especially if Danny Rule leaves. So, what are you getting out of it other than losing money every year? And again, this is a really important thing to progress as a club. You don't have to break the bank and be £1 million of debt. You just have to have a solid strategy. That's never been the case with Sheffield Wednesday. They sign aging players for their squad to fill gaps. When was the last time we had a really good quality, youth academy product come through into Wednesday, break into the first team and become a bona fide, first teamer? It's been a very rare case. And I think that, again, probably comes down to, a lot of things. Unfortunately, you compare it to the neighbour Sheffield United and the players that they got through coming there. That I think that all of that stems from the culture at the club and at the top as well. That's not just down to coaching and catchment area and recruitment. That comes down to the culture that is led from the very top. I just don't think Chansiri's got the sense you need, I think, to be a football club owner. It's very different to running a business, and I don't think he's ever understood that.
Spot on. Speaking of how our owners benefiting, Blackburn's owners, the Venkys, do not want to sell the club and haven't received any concrete offers. That's according to club chief exec Steve Waggett, who's been speaking to the BBC. He said he can't see them leaving anytime soon, but if a legitimate offer came in, they would consider it. However, he also said there hasn't been a genuine offer to buy the club in the 7.5 years he's been there. Waggett has been speaking after Blackburn fans released an open letter calling for him, the club's COO and head of football operations, not to attend their remaining games. And this goes back to what we were saying on Sunday, Justin. What are the Venkys getting out of holding on to Blackburn Rovers? It really does boggle the mind.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? I think modern football club ownership genuinely is strange because football clubs lose money. So unless your heart's in it, and it really has to be in it, and you're attending games and you love it, what are you getting out of it? You look at Birmingham, for example, they're going to lose a lot of money under Tom Wagner and the group down there. But there's a clear strategy to really invest in the area and do a lot there. Again, whether that means profit in the future is another question, but you can tell that their heart's in it, and they do want to turn a profit eventually. So these football club owners like Venky, like Chansiri, who just pay the losses each year, without the club ever really going anywhere. What's in it for you? I don't understand. I really don't. And I guess it's I may be being a bit naive, but football club ownership, as I say, is different to running a business. You've got to be in it. You've got to love it. And I don't think I've ever really got that from the Venkys, and certainly the fans have never got that from the Venkys. So if the people that are closest to the club, like supporters, aren't getting a good vibe from you, then maybe it's time to be a bit more adamant with your approach to selling the club.
Yeah. Well, I just don't get what the Venkys have ever got out of having Blackburn under their control. Because the only thing I can come up with as to why the Venkys would still want to be the owners of Blackburn Rovers is that they naively think there's a small chance Blackburn will be a Premier League side soon. And therefore they can get back a decent chunk of the money that they've lost. But that's not going to happen because Blackburn have a ceiling, as we've seen this season. The other thing is, and this sounds a lot like Chancery, doesn't it? We don't want to sell, but if a genuine offer comes in, we'd consider it. Let me translate that for anyone who doesn't understand it. We're only going to sell if someone pays well over the odds for the club. That's what they mean here, isn't it? And the question you've got to ask is, why would someone pay well over the odds for Blackburn Rovers? Yes, they're a big club and everything. Yes, they've got a lot of history, but getting to the Premier League is getting increasingly difficult. And I would say Blackburn are one of the less prepared clubs in the Championship to make a serious challenge for promotion, despite what's happened this season. And the main reason for that is because of years and years of the Venkys underfunding the football club, Justin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think an important point here when it comes to selling the club is both Blackburn and Sheffield Wednesday have sold physical assets to their owners to offset losses, i.e. the stadium and the training ground from Blackburn's point of view. So selling the club becomes a lot harder because that debt is now real. It's a physical debt because a new owner coming in will have to pay cash for those things as part of a takeover. So they suddenly become a little bit harder to sell and obviously a lot more expensive to really, really dumb it down. And I think you do make a really good point. What's the motive here? What are you getting out of it? I think the most annoying and frustrating thing from a supporter's point of view is these owners will never understand or realise that they're the ones holding it back. And you're right. I think Blackburn and Sheffield Wednesday themselves, they're closer to relegation than they are promotion, unfortunately. When you've got owners like this, we say it time and time again, you circle the drain. Sheffield Wednesday have been up and down it. Blackburn have been up and down it. It can happen again because, as I say, they don't have the foresight to really put a structure in place and invest in the club where places need to be invested in.
Yeah. I think you're spot on, Justin. Even though Blackburn and Sheffield Wednesday have each been flirting with the playoffs at various points of the season, I think that is absolutely spot on because I just think these owners are thinking, they may stumble into the Premier League, but it's just not going to happen because of the gap, which we've spoken about a lot recently between the Premier League and the Championship. That is, you've got to be very, very smartly run to be able to bridge that gap. And we all know Blackburn and Sheffield Wednesday aren't. So, as you say, they're more likely to be relegated than they are to be promoted anytime soon. Let's move on from some crappy owners to some rare early April transfer business, shall we? Because Sunderland have agreed a deal to sell 18-year-old winger Tommy Watson to Brighton in the summer. The fee is reportedly said to be around £10 million. He's played 14 times in the league this season for Sunderland. And this feels a bit disappointing to me, Justin. I know Sunderland fans are very, very disappointed about it because it's a local lad from the Sunderland Academy leaving before he's even made a proper mark on the first team. Feels a bit premature, if you ask me, this move.
I think you can argue it is premature from Tommy Watson's perspective because I think when you're as young as he is, to play as little football as he has, then certainly, it feels a bit unfulfilled at the club that you're at, and it's a huge risk from Brighton, who are investing in a player who really hasn't done a lot. I speak purely from a neutral point of view. I can't be disappointed in this because I look at this from probably a little bit without the passion and emotion of being a Sunderland fan. You've got £10 million for a player who's played 14 times for your team. Can't be just that disappointed and not witnessing something develop. But that being said, I know Sunderland have got a very unique relationship with the academy products that come through their club. because most of the time they are very local lads. They get it. They're part of the club. They bleed Sunderland. Maybe it's an overly cynical view, but I haven't seen enough of Watson to be really convinced that he's worth £10 million. I think 14 games, we can see youngsters really come in and light the place up. Lewis Sibley, all those years ago, was apparently better than Jude Bellingham, and he's now on loan at Rotherham, unfortunately. But yeah, as neutral, can't get attached to Tommy Watson. And then obviously the second point is you've not actually seen what he can do. So I think in time it might work out in Sunderland's favour that they got £10 million for a player who has not yet really achieved anything.
I think you are perhaps being overly cynical, because we did see a brief glimpse earlier this season of what Watson can do. I remember him tearing Sheffield United apart when he's still only 18 now, earlier in the season. And then he had that game where he scored a brace. I can't remember who that was against off the top of my head, but then he got injured for several months and is only getting back into the team now. But we did see a brief sample size of what he can do and how much of a talent he is. But that just makes it an even bigger shame that he's done this season and is already going out the door. I get from Watson's perspective, Brighton are a great club with a great record of bringing players through, but it's not like Sunderland don't give players a chance, is it? Yeah. Sunderland are one of the best clubs in the country right now for bringing young players through. You could argue the best. And they're a club on the up, a club going places. I'm sure he probably would have been a regular for them next season if they didn't get promoted. So I think he'd have been better off staying for at least another year. From a Sunderland perspective, he could have been a big player for them if they are still in the Championship, and potentially left for more than twice the price next season. And the other thing is, where's he going to play next season? Because he's going to Brighton, where there's a hell of a lot of competition for first-team football. So is he just going to be sent out on loan to the Championship anyway? If so, what's the point?
Yeah, no, it is a fair point. But that being said, Sunderland have got £10 million. I think their strategy is to do this. Every club in the Championship is a selling club. I think it's really worth bearing in mind. But Sunderland could well get 2 players out of this move. Reinvest that money back into the squad, and won't necessarily be better than Tommy Watson in 5 years' time. But they could be the difference in getting Sunderland into the Premier League, or making them a bona fide Premier League. Or signing players for the Premier League if they do get promoted. So I think there are many ways to look at this, but I think this is just part of Sunderland's long-term strategy. So yeah, it's disappointing. Can he probably get sold before he's ever really made his mark? That being said, he's been injured for a long period of this season. There's nothing you can say that he might be an injury-prone player for the next few years. He might never develop. You look at Jack Clarke, when he went to Spurs, never really got going. Ryan Sessegnon's another one who went to Spurs and never really got going. They've ended up back at their previous clubs in some way. Well, Ryan Sessegnon did, and obviously Jack Clarke made his mark at Sunderland. So, yeah, could come back in a few years' time and pick up where he left off.
Justin, I wanted to finish off the show by taking a brief diversion from our usual Championship talk to head over to sunny Spain and catch up with an old friend of ours. That friend being Carlos Corberan. He, of course, left West Brom back in December to join his boyhood club, Valencia. Now, they were bottom of the table when he went there, but since then, only 4 clubs in La Liga have won more points than them. And we were always big fans of Carlos Corberan, whether he was at Huddersfield or West Brom, Justin. So I, for one, I am delighted to see him doing a fantastic job in, a big league like La Liga, Justin, because what a manager.
He's a brilliant manager. And I think all this is exemplify what he's doing, because La Liga is one of the top clubs in Europe, in the world, in terms of quality. Valencia as well is a huge football club as well, who have had a lot of really tough times over the years because of the debt and all of that. But so for him to actually get them competitive and pushing up the table, I think is remarkable, especially in a league that is a difficult one to navigate, because there's that middle ground of teams is so competitive. When you step away from sort of the Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, and Barcelona, for example. So I think it's an incredible turnaround. And again, he's not your usual typical Spanish football type of manager either. So maybe that's another reason why he's having success. Is his style of play is a little bit different. Probably not very Spanish. I think would be the easiest way to describe it.
Yeah, he's not playing tiki-taka particularly, is he? And I promise we're not including this in the show to say to West Brom fans, oh, look at what you could have had. Because I think there's a mutual respect from West Brom fans to Corberan, isn't there? That this was a big job for him, meant a lot to him, and he's done a lot for West Brom in the circumstances while he was there. I think the big thing for me is, and I have said this a couple of times this season, why did someone like Leicester get him in? Of course, his stock might not be as high now if he were to have gone to Leicester as it is currently. And he would have much preferred to, of course, manage his boyhood club. But Leicester appointed Ruud van Nistelrooy a few weeks before Corberan left West Brom. They had the perfect opportunity to get a very talented coach who publicly admitted he wasn't happy with the club's financial position. And they went for Van Nistelrooy for reasons which everyone is still questioning now. But yeah, Corberan's a great manager. We've always said this, haven't we? And I'm sure we'll probably be a Premier League manager at some point, Justin.
I would expect a team to take a risk on him. Maybe even Leeds if Daniel
Never rule it out, would you?
Daniel Farker farks things up. They'd be in the market for a manager. I don't think Corberan would leave Valencia so soon. Again, I think some of his motivations might have been family related as well. So yeah, Corberan is a good manager. You are right. I think what that does show is I think Premier League teams have stopped taking risks on Championship managers and are going for names sometimes. I think obviously Ruud van Nistelrooy is a really good example. You look at the job Liam Rossigny is doing at Strasbourg in Ligue 1 as well. These managers haven't really lit the world up in the Championship because they haven't got promoted, but they're very sort of style of play orientated, and we're seeing the success of their coaching qualities in other leagues. That might point to a bit of a weakness that we have over here, potentially. If these coaches are getting success in other leagues, but that's probably a debate and a long look over for another episode, another day. But I think that point is quite telling as well.
That is interesting, actually, because I think 20 years ago, if a manager was doing a good job in the Championship, then he'd be getting a bit of interest from the Premier League. But now that bar is a lot higher, isn't it? You think of Kieran McKenna, Vincent Kompany, it's only really the cream of the crop who do get interest from Premier League sides. Even having said that, Kompany went to Bayern Munich, Enzo Maresca went to Chelsea, McKenna was linked with various, big clubs, wasn't he? So if you're a top Championship manager, then you're getting linked with the elite clubs nowadays. There's no in between, apparently.
No, it's true. But again, Maresca is very style of play driven, isn't he? And so too is Vincent Kompany. Like Vincent Kompany, we had that Sean Dyche clips that came out a couple of weeks ago about the success that he had at Burnley and how he didn't leave them in debt, but he never got the Bayern Munich job. Well, it's because your coaching philosophy doesn't develop players. Jeff Hendrick's a brilliant example of that. You coached everything good out of him, Sean Dyche, and now he's a shell of a man. Vincent Kompany is very different. He's very style of play oriented, very technical coach, and that's why the top clubs are going to be interested in those types of coaches, and that's why I think Liam Rossigny has got success in Strasbourg. I think Carlos Corberan is having success in Spain as well. And obviously Maresca is a bit of a unique scenario because he was Pep's assistant. Leicester were a big club with a big budget when they appointed him. He was going to get a top job eventually, I think, anyway. Now he's at Chelsea. But I think that ability to develop technically, I think, is a big factor in all of this as well.
Can't believe you're still bitter about the Jeff Hendrick to Burnley thing.
Honestly,
just casually drop that in there.
I would. It's the same as Frank Lampard and what he did to Derby. I will drop this in at various points over the next few years. Sean Dyche, as I say, coached all the good things out of Jeff Hendrick, and now he's just a very normal, boring, average footballer.
Yeah. But here you have it, ladies and gents. You've heard it here first. If you're a top Championship manager, then you're more likely to get an elite job nowadays than a mid-table mid-table Premier League one. So I look forward to Scott Parker being at Barcelona next season. But anyway, ladies and gents, this has been the Second Tier Podcast, and we'll of course be back again tomorrow with the preview show brought to you by SBK as we look ahead to another huge weekend of Championship action. So we look forward to seeing you then for that. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.